The planet Solara glimmered under two suns, its surface a mixture of crystal forests and silver mountains that reflected light in every direction. The Lirathi, a proud and ancient alien race, had ruled this world for thousands of cycles. They were known across the galaxy for their intelligence, discipline, and unmatched technology. Yet, despite their power and wisdom, they faced a problem no machine could solve. Their princess, Althara, had fallen ill, and the illness baffled even their most brilliant healers. In the grand palace of Zalara, which rose like a tower of mirrors above the landscape, Althara lay in her private chamber. Her skin, normally radiant with a faint luminescence, had grown pale. Her movements were slow, and her once brilliant eyes seemed dim. The palace physicians had tried every treatment known to their civilization, energy beams, nanobots, genetic therapies, but nothing worked. The princess's condition worsened each day. The royal council convened urgently in the palace's central hall. The chamber was vast, with floors of polished silver and walls embedded with intricate circuits that pulsed softly with light. Council members, tall and elegant, their forms shimmering in the natural glow of Zalara, gathered around a circular table. They spoke in low, precise tones, each word carrying weight. "She is beyond the reach of our medicines," one counselor said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "Even the most advanced nanotechnology has failed. If she continues like this, she may not survive the cycle." Another counselor shook his head. "We cannot allow the royal line to weaken. The survival of our people depends on her." The discussion went on, but no solution emerged. Desperation began to creep into the room. It was then that one counselor, younger and less rigid than the others, spoke hesitantly. "There are humans nearby," he said. "They have methods we do not understand. Perhaps one of them could help. Thanks for watching." "Thanks for watching." They were found one. The room fell silent. Mentioning humans was taboo. The Lirathi had always regarded humans as primitive. Their technology was crude, their lives chaotic, and their culture unpredictable. They were considered incapable of contributing to serious matters, especially in the realm of science or healing. Yet the council could not ignore the possibility. They decided, reluctantly, to allow a human to attempt to heal the princess, though the decision was met with murmurs of disbelief and disapproval. Several hours later, a sleek human spacecraft descended from the sky. Its hull was streamlined and functional, lacking the elegance of Lirathi design. Yet it moved with surprising precision. Inside, Dr. Elias Grant adjusted his medical instruments as the ship landed. Elias was a human in his mid-30s, tall and lean, with bright eyes that reflected intelligence and warmth. He was known for his work on human regenerative therapies and emotional medicine fields that combined biology with understanding the subtle effects of empathy and human touch. Elias stepped out of the spacecraft, taking in the brilliance of Zalara. His breath caught for a moment. He had studied the planet from afar, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of the mirrored mountains and glowing forests. He was here not as a conqueror or explorer, but as a healer, a role few humans had achieved on alien worlds. The palace guards, towering figures with expressions that betrayed nothing, escorted him to the princess's chamber. Every step he took echoed in the polished corridors, a sound foreign to the usual harmony of Lirathi life. Althara lay on a silver bed, her small form covered in layers of shimmering cloth. When she saw Elias, her eyes widened slightly, though she did not speak. Humans were not supposed to touch or influence her. The Lirathi had taught their young that interaction with humans was dangerous and unnecessary. Yet, something about Elias's presence felt different. There was calmness in him, an assurance that radiated from his gestures, and perhaps, unknowingly, hope. Elias approached slowly. "Princess Althara," he said softly, his voice carrying a gentle warmth. "I'm here to help you. You don't need to be afraid." Althara's lips barely moved. Her voice was faint. "Can you heal me?" Elias nodded. "I will do my best, but first, I need to understand you. your feelings, and your pain. The Lirathi healers exchanged uneasy glances. Feelings? Pain? These were concepts that their people rarely acknowledged openly, much less as part of a treatment. But Elias had insisted, and they had no choice. Elias observed her closely. He noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the shallow rhythm of her breath, and the way her eyes darted around the room. He realized quickly that Althara's condition was not purely physical. The illness was connected to her suppressed emotions. Lirathi culture emphasized logic and control, and showing vulnerability was considered weakness. Princess Althara had spent her life suppressing emotions, avoiding connection even with her own family. Gently, Elias extended his hand. "May I hold your hand?" he asked. The counselors gasped. Touching was considered intimate, almost forbidden. Althara's mother, Queen Solara, frowned sharply. "That is unnecessary," she exclaimed. "You will not touch her, human." Elias kept his hand slightly raised but calm. "It is part of the process. It is not invasive or harmful. I ask only for a simple connection." Althara's eyes met his. Something unspoken passed between them, curiosity, trust, and the faintest glimmer of hope. Slowly, she reached out, her delicate fingers meeting his. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, subtly, the room seemed warmer. Althara's breathing, previously shallow, became steadier. A small color returned to her skin, and her eyes, though still weak, reflected more light. The healers whispered to each other in disbelief. This human, a simple touch had affected the princess. Elias smiled gently. "See? Connection can be as powerful as any medicine. But it must come from willingness, from openness." Althara's lips curved into the faintest smile. It was barely perceptible, but it was enough to draw the astonished gaze of the Lirathi council. She had not smiled in years, not since the pressures of her royal duties and the cold expectations of her family had left her isolated. Over the next hours, Elias worked carefully. He monitored her vitals, applied his regenerative techniques, and encouraged her to express herself in small ways by speaking, by moving, by simply allowing a sense of calm to exist. He spoke gently about emotions, about kindness, and about the strength found in trust. The council members, initially critical, began to watch in quiet astonishment. Althara's condition improved gradually. The faint glow returned to her skin, her breathing became steady, and small signs of energy appeared in her movements. Queen Solara, though reluctant to admit it, found herself studying Elias with a mix of suspicion and awe. How could a human, considered primitive by her people, possess such a profound understanding of life and healing? As the first day of treatment ended, Elias stepped back and let Althara rest. The princess's eyes fluttered closed, but there was a calmness there that had not existed before. The council remained silent, realizing that they had witnessed something unprecedented. For the first time in centuries, a human had influenced the life of the royal family in a way that no Lirathi technology could. The implications were not yet clear. But one thing was certain. The simple touch of a human had begun to bridge the gap between two very different worlds. Elias left the chamber quietly, knowing the real work was only beginning. Healing the body was one thing. Nurturing the heart and mind of a Lirathi princess would be the true challenge. And yet, for the first time, there was hope that the princess could recover fully. Not just from her illness, but from the coldness of a life lived without genuine emotional connection. As he walked through the mirrored halls of the palace, he glanced back at Althara. She had closed her eyes, but a small smile lingered. The smallest touch, a gentle gesture of human care, had sparked a change that no technology could achieve. And in that moment, Elias understood something fundamental. Sometimes, the greatest power in the universe was not in machines, weapons, or knowledge, but in the simple, undeniable strength of human empathy. Outside, the twin suns of Zalara began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the crystal forests. The light touched the silver mountains and the mirrored palace, reflecting in 1,000 directions. It was a beautiful, quiet moment. Yet beneath it lay the beginning of a profound transformation. The princess, the royal family, and even the people of Zilara would never see the world in the same way again. And for a human named Elias, this was just the start of a journey that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about healing, connection, and the strength of the human touch. The next morning, the palace of Zilara felt unusually quiet. The crystal forests outside shimmered under the twin suns, but inside, tension buzzed softly through the polished halls. Word had spread among the royal council and palace staff that a human, Elias Grant, was responsible for the small improvement in Princess Althara's condition. Many found the idea almost impossible to accept. How could a primitive species, with no advanced technology or centuries of careful study, succeed where their most brilliant minds had failed? Queen Solara paced her chambers, her hands pressed tightly behind her back. Her thoughts were a tangle of disbelief, worry, and reluctant curiosity. She had watched Elias work with the princess yesterday, seen her color return, seen the faint hint of life and warmth in her expression. It defied logic. Yet it had happened. She could not deny it, and yet she could not fully embrace it. "You are sure this human will not harm her?" she asked one of her advisors, her voice controlled but laced with concern. "He has done nothing but help," the advisor replied. "Yet the method is foreign. Physical touch, emotional encouragement. These are not part of our practice. We cannot measure them with our instruments." Solara sighed, realizing that fear and pride were battling within her. She had been raised to trust in science, in reason, in the Lirathi way. Yet here was a human, demonstrating that another kind of power existed, one that she could not control or fully understand. Meanwhile, in the princess's chamber, Elias had already begun his morning routine. Althara sat upright in bed, her posture careful and deliberate. She looked different today, more alert, more aware, and yet still cautious. The last day's small victories had not erased her fear of judgment, of making mistakes in a world that demanded perfection. "Good morning, princess," Elias said softly, entering the room with a tray of nourishing food. "How do you feel today?" "Number Kroos." Althara studied him for a moment before replying, "Better, a little stronger." Her voice was still soft, but it carried more confidence than the day before. Elias smiled. "That's good. Today we will continue slowly. I want to help you regain not just your strength, but your sense of peace. Healing the body is important, but healing the heart is just as crucial." The Lirathi healers watched from a distance, their expressions a mixture of fascination and skepticism. Some whispered quietly to each other, questioning Elias's methods. Others could not deny the results. The princess's improvement was real, and it was happening in front of their eyes. Elias approached Althara and gently took her hand again. She flinched slightly at first, but then relaxed as he held it. The warmth of his touch seemed to travel into her. Not just physically, but emotionally. She felt a small flicker of something she had not experienced in years. "Trust. Close your eyes and take a deep breath," Elias instructed. "Think of a moment when you felt safe, even for a second. Let that feeling spread through your body." Althara obeyed, though she was unsure how this would help. Gradually, as she focused on the sensation, she felt tension leaving her shoulders, a lightness creeping into her chest. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe fully and freely. The palace healers were silent, their instruments detecting subtle changes in her vital signs, though they could not explain them. Some began to exchange uneasy glances. Perhaps there was more to this human than they had assumed. As the morning progressed, Elias encouraged Althara to move gently, stretching her limbs, lifting her arms, and even taking small steps with support. Each action, he explained, helped rebuild the connection between mind and body. She listened carefully, trying to follow his instructions. During a break, Althara looked at Elias with curiosity. "Why do humans care so much about feelings?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "On Zilara, We think emotions are distractions. They make people weak. Elias considered her question carefully. Emotions are not weakness, he said slowly. They are part of who we are. They help us connect, understand, and sometimes even heal. Feeling fear, joy, or sadness is what makes us human. And it can be powerful in ways machines and technology cannot reach. Althara thought about this. She had lived her life under strict rules, taught to suppress every feeling that might interfere with logic. And yet, the human's touch, his calm voice, his patience, they had brought her a sense of warmth she had never known. It was confusing, yes, but also comforting. Later in the day, word reached the rest of the royal family that the princess had responded well to the human's care. Some were shocked, others angry, and a few were quietly curious. Whispers filled the palace corridors. How can a human help her? One noble muttered. It is impossible. Another whispered. Perhaps there is more to them than we have believed. The social tension was palpable. Many Lirathi nobles feared that accepting human methods would weaken their traditions. Others worried about the perception of their people if they were seen as reliant on a primitive species. The council debated endlessly, yet nothing could deny the truth. Althara was improving. As the sun began to set, Elias sat beside Althara's bed, encouraging her to rest. She leaned back against the soft cushions, feeling unusually comfortable. Princess, Elias said gently. Tomorrow we will try something new. I want you to tell me a story from your life, anything at all. You don't need to hide your thoughts or feelings, just speak freely. Althara hesitated. Speaking freely had always been forbidden, even within her family. And yet, she found herself wanting to trust this human, to let him understand her world. She nodded slightly. Very well, she whispered. I will try. Elias smiled encouragingly. That is all I ask. That night, as the palace quieted and the twin moons rose in the sky, Althara reflected on the day. She felt a strange mix of hope, fear, and curiosity. The human's presence had changed something inside her. She felt seen, understood, and for the first time, alive in a way she had not experienced before. Meanwhile, Elias reviewed his notes and prepared for the next day. He knew that the challenge ahead was more than physical healing. The princess had been trained for years to suppress her emotions, and the Lirathi culture discouraged any form of openness. Patience, understanding, and respect for their customs would be essential. Yet he also understood that Althara's recovery was just the beginning. If she could embrace the small power of human empathy, she might not only heal herself but also inspire her people to reconsider the rigid ways that had dominated their civilization for centuries. The following morning, Althara sat up more confidently. She allowed Elias to hold her hand again. And this time, she did not flinch. She even smiled. A small but genuine expression. The council, watching from a distance, could barely believe what they were witnessing. Elias guided her through gentle exercises, both physical and emotional. He asked her to recall memories that had once frightened her and to speak them aloud. At first, she struggled, her voice trembling as she shared moments of loneliness, fear, and pressure. But with each word, she grew stronger, her color returning, her body moving with more ease. By midday, Althara was able to stand and walk short distances without support. The Lirathi healers were stunned. Machines and medical devices had failed, yet human empathy and encouragement had succeeded. Some began to whisper quietly among themselves, questioning long-held beliefs. Perhaps we have underestimated humans. One healer murmured. Their ways are different, but effective. Word of the princess's improvement spread quickly, reaching even the far corners of the palace. The nobles debated fiercely, torn between tradition and the undeniable reality of her recovery. Many could not bring themselves to admit it, but the human had succeeded where they had failed. As evening approached, Elias and Althara sat quietly, her hand resting in his. She had begun to share small stories of her childhood, moments of joy and fear alike. Each story brought more light into her eyes, more strength into her body. She was beginning to understand that emotions, long suppressed, could be a source of power rather than weakness. Elias looked at her and said softly, "You are stronger than you realize, princess. Not just because of your body, but because of your heart. Trusting and feeling does not make you weak, it makes you human, and it makes you capable of great things." Althara nodded, feeling a warmth she had never known. The rigid expectations of her culture had always weighed on her, but the human's words reminded her that strength could come from connection, trust, and courage. As the twin moons of Zilara rose high, casting a soft silver light across the palace, the princess closed her eyes, feeling a quiet sense of peace. She had begun a journey not just of healing, but of discovery about herself, about humans, and about the power of empathy that transcended species. For Elias, the day had been a victory. But he knew the true test lay ahead. The royal family's skepticism, the nobles' fear, and the culture's rigid rules would challenge everything they were building. Yet he had hope. Althara's small victories were a sign that even in the most advanced civilizations, the simplest human qualities, kindness, patience, understanding, and touch, could achieve what no technology could. And so, the palace of Zilara settled into the night, the light of the moons reflecting across the silver floors, and a quiet sense of anticipation filled the air. Change was coming, slow but unstoppable, and it began with a simple human touch. Days passed on Zilara, and with each sunrise, the princess's strength grew. Althara walked through her chambers and the crystal corridors with more ease than before. Her skin regained its soft glow. Her movements were no longer stiff, and for the first time, she laughed freely, a sound that filled the palace with a warmth long absent. Yet, with her progress came new tensions. The Lirathi nobles could no longer ignore the truth of her recovery, yet pride and tradition made it impossible for them to fully accept it. The palace was divided into quiet factions, some watching Althara with admiration, others with suspicion, and a few with outright hostility. They whispered of the human who dared to touch and teach the princess, calling Elias an intruder, a threat to their rigid customs. Althara, aware of the murmurs, felt a strange mixture of fear and defiance. She had begun to understand the human's lessons. Strength could come from openness, courage could come from trust, and empathy could be a force more powerful than the cold logic her people valued so highly. Yet the resistance of her own family reminded her that change often stirred fear before acceptance. One afternoon, Elias guided Althara to a terrace overlooking the mirrored mountains. The twin suns reflected off the peaks, casting dancing lights across the crystal forests. He encouraged her to breathe deeply, to let the beauty of her surroundings fill her senses. "Look at this, princess," he said softly. "The world is full of wonders. And so is your heart. The more you allow yourself to feel, the stronger you become." Althara nodded, letting the sunlight warm her skin. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel something she had never permitted before: joy. It was small at first, like a spark, but it grew steadily, filling her with energy she had thought lost forever. Their peaceful moment, however, did not last. News arrived from the palace council. Several influential nobles were plotting to remove Elias from the palace, fearing that his methods were undermining centuries of tradition. They argued that humans were unpredictable, emotional beings, whose influence could destabilize the royal family and, by extension, the entire planet. Althara's mother, Queen Zilara, though privately impressed by Elias's results, found herself caught in the conflict. She could not openly defy the council, yet she could not deny the improvement in her daughter. The queen realized that Althara's recovery was also changing the palace itself, forcing even the most conservative nobles to confront the limits of their own understanding. Elias, sensing the tension, approached Althara with a calm voice. "They are afraid," he said. "Fear is natural, but it cannot stop progress. You have to decide what you believe is right." Althara looked at him, her eyes steady. "I believe in what you have taught me," she said. "I feel stronger. I feel alive. I cannot ignore that, even if others do." Over the next several days, The tension in the palace escalated. Nobles tried subtle intimidation glances, comments, and restrictive rules, but Althara, inspired by Elias, refused to retreat. She began speaking more freely, sharing her thoughts with a small circle of trusted attendants. She laughed openly, encouraged by the human's words that strength was not in suppression, but in acceptance. The Lirathi healers, initially skeptical, observed her transformation with quiet awe. They could not explain it scientifically, yet the results were undeniable. Althara's energy increased. Her immune functions improved, and her body responded in ways their advanced technology could not replicate. Even the palace guards, stoic and rigid, began to notice the subtle lightness in her movements, the brightness in her eyes, and the warmth she radiated. One day, a senior noble approached the queen privately, his voice low and urgent. "Your daughter is changing too much. The human's influence, it is dangerous. If the council believes she is being corrupted, they may act against you both." Queen Solara's eyes narrowed. "And if we act against him, she may lose the progress she has gained. Do you understand that? Her life, her strength, depends on this human. We cannot ignore it." The noble hesitated, caught between duty and logic. Solara's tone left no room for argument. The palace was entering uncharted territory, and the balance of tradition and progress hung by a fragile thread. Meanwhile, Althara and Elias continued their work. Each day, they explored new methods to strengthen her mind and body. Elias encouraged her to tell stories of her childhood, to express moments of fear and happiness alike. At first, she hesitated, struggling to find words for feelings she had long buried. But with each attempt, she grew more confident, more resilient. One evening, as the twin moons rose over Zalara, Althara shared a story of a childhood friend she had loved dearly but had lost to circumstance. Her voice trembled at first, but Elias's calm presence allowed her to continue. When she finished, a sense of release washed over her. She felt lighter, freer, and more herself than she had in years. Elias smiled gently. "See what happens when you allow yourself to feel? The body and mind are connected. Healing is not just about medicine. It is about understanding, connection, and courage." Althara nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. She realized that the human had not just improved her health, he had opened a door to a new way of life, one where emotions were not a weakness but a strength. But not all in the palace were pleased. Some nobles viewed her progress as a threat. They whispered that Althara was becoming too independent, too influenced by human ways, and that her authority would weaken the Lirathi traditions. Fear turned into hostility. Secret meetings were held, plotting to remove Elias and restore strict control over the princess. Althara began to sense the tension. She overheard snippets of conversations, felt the cold stares, and realized that the path forward would not be easy. Yet, instead of retreating, she felt a spark of courage ignited by the human's teachings. Strength was not in submission, she thought. It was in standing firm, even when others opposed her. The next day, Elias suggested a more daring exercise. "We will go outside the palace," he said. "You will walk among your people, interact with them, and see the world beyond these walls. It will be challenging, but it will show you your own power and resilience." Althara hesitated. She had rarely left the palace grounds, and interacting with her people carried risks. Nobles could interpret her actions as rebellion, and the human's presence could provoke further opposition. Yet she trusted Elias and herself. Together, they stepped onto the palace terraces and descended into the crystal forests. The citizens of Zalara paused to observe their princess. Some were cautious, whispering about the unusual human at her side. Others, especially the younger ones, felt hope in her presence, inspired by the vitality she now displayed. Althara moved carefully but confidently, guided by Elias. She allowed herself to speak freely, to answer questions, and even to laugh with the children she met. Her gestures, her warmth, and her openness began to break down the barriers between royalty and citizen. She realized that healing was not just for herself, it could be shared, extended to her people in ways no technology had allowed before. Back in the palace, the council convened urgently. Reports of the princess walking and speaking with citizens reached them, and their fear grew. Some demanded immediate action against Elias. Others, however, hesitated, recognizing that removing him could undo the remarkable progress Althara had achieved. The debate grew heated, and for the first time, cracks appeared in the council's unified front. Althara returned to the palace that evening exhausted but exhilarated. She had faced her fears, challenged expectations, and connected with her people. Elias smiled, proudly. "You are discovering your own strength," he said, "and your courage will inspire others." Change often begins with one brave act. The princess reflected on the day. For centuries, the Lirathi had lived by rigid rules, avoiding emotional expression, valuing logic above all else. Yet here she was, alive, vibrant, and learning that the power of feeling, trust, and connection could rival any technology. The journey ahead would not be easy, and resistance from her family and the nobles was inevitable. But she had tasted the strength of courage and empathy. As the twin moons of Zelara rose high in the sky, casting their silver glow across the palace and forests, Althara felt a sense of quiet determination. She knew the days ahead would bring challenges, opposition, and difficult choices. Yet she also knew she had discovered something extraordinary, a way to heal, to grow, and to inspire her people. All through the simple but powerful qualities of trust, courage, and human connection. Elias, observing the princess, realized that their work was far from over. The Lirathi's skepticism and fear would challenge every step, and threats from within the palace were growing. Yet he also understood that Althara's transformation was undeniable. She had begun a journey not only of healing but of leadership that could change her world forever. And in that quiet night, beneath the silver glow of the moons and the light of distant stars, a subtle but powerful change was already unfolding. The princess, the human, and the palace of Zelara had crossed the first threshold of a new era. A time when strength was measured not just in power and technology, but in courage, empathy, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. The palace of Zelara was restless. Word of Princess Althara's progress had spread throughout the royal court, and tension simmered among the council members. Some viewed her recovery as a miracle, while others saw it as a threat to their authority. The human, Elias Grant, had become an unexpected figure of influence, and whispers of rebellion against the traditional ways grew louder. Althara, however, was undeterred. Her health had returned fully. But more importantly, she had discovered a new sense of purpose. The lessons Elias had taught her, courage, empathy, and trust, had reshaped her understanding of leadership and strength. She knew she could no longer remain passive. The people of Zelara, and even her own family, needed to see that change could be both safe and powerful. That morning, she summoned the royal council. The chamber, vast and gleaming, was filled with murmurs as the nobles took their places. Althara stood before them, her posture firm, her eyes bright. For the first time, she spoke not as a child of tradition but as a leader ready to guide her people. "I have been ill," she began, her voice clear and steady. "And the best technology of our civilization could not heal me. But a human, using methods unfamiliar to us, has helped me. He has shown me that empathy, trust, and courage are as powerful as any machine." The council was stunned into silence. Some gasped. Others leaned forward, unwilling to believe her words. A senior noble finally spoke, his voice cold. "Princess, you are suggesting we abandon our traditions, our understanding of science?" Althara shook her head. "Not abandon, but expand. Our traditions have brought us far, but they are not complete. Strength is not only in knowledge and technology, it is in connection, in understanding, and in the willingness to embrace what is unknown." Elias, standing quietly beside her, nodded subtly. He had encouraged her to find her voice, and now she used it to inspire more than just herself. Over the next hours, Althara demonstrated her improved vitality. She walked among the council members, showing her energy and resilience. She shared stories of her growth, of how she had learned to trust, to feel, and to act with courage. Slowly, some nobles began to see that what she had achieved was real and meaningful, yet not all were convinced. A faction of the council, led by an influential noble named Vorin, plotted to remove Elias immediately, claiming that human influence was corrupting the princess and threatening the stability of Zalara. They planned to confront Althara with an ultimatum: cease contact with Elias, or face exile from the royal circle. Althara sensed the coming confrontation. She had faced fear before, but this was different. This was a test not of her body or her mind, but of her will. She took a deep breath, recalling Elias's lessons. Courage, she remembered, was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. The confrontation occurred in the Grand Hall at sunset. Vorin and his supporters confronted the princess directly. "You must end this human's influence immediately," Vorin demanded. "Your behavior, your words, your actions, all are destabilizing our traditions. The council cannot allow it." Althara stood tall. "I will not end what has healed me," she replied calmly. "Elias has not harmed me. He has helped me understand my strength. If you see this as danger, then the danger is in your fear, not in the lessons he teaches." A heated debate erupted. The nobles argued loudly, their voices echoing against the polished walls. Some demanded adherence to tradition. Others quietly admitted that Althara's vitality and leadership were undeniable. It became clear that the council itself was divided, and the power of fear and rigidity could no longer dominate unchallenged. Seeing an opportunity, Althara made her next move. She requested to address the citizens of Zalara directly. While unusual, the council hesitated to refuse, fearing backlash if the princess were ignored. Elias supported her quietly, guiding her with encouragement. Together, they stepped onto the palace terrace, overlooking the crystal forests. Below, citizens had gathered, curious and hopeful. For generations, the people had followed tradition blindly, but the princess now showed them a different path, one that combined strength with understanding, authority with empathy. Althara raised her voice so that it carried across the gathering. "People of Zalara," she began. "For centuries, we have relied solely on logic and technology, but sometimes, the greatest strength comes from our hearts, from trust, courage, and connection. I have learned this with the help of a human who has shown me the power of kindness and understanding, and I am stronger because of it." The crowd murmured, hesitant at first, then with growing curiosity. People noticed the princess's vitality, the light in her eyes, and the warmth she radiated. She continued, "Our traditions are valuable, but they are not complete. Together, we can embrace both knowledge and empathy. We can become stronger, healthier, and wiser than ever before." A ripple of approval spread through the crowd. The citizens, inspired by the princess's courage, began to cheer, their voices rising in unison. The energy of hope and belief filled the air, and for the first time in centuries, Zalara felt truly alive. Back in the palace, some council members shifted uncomfortably. They realized that opposing the princess openly could alienate the citizens. Vorin and his faction remained defiant, but their influence was weakening. The balance of power was changing, and it was driven not by machines, weapons, or fear, but by the undeniable human qualities of trust and courage. Over the following days, Althara and Elias worked together to expand the healing methods beyond the princess alone. Citizens and palace staff who had minor illnesses or emotional strains began to show remarkable improvements under his guidance. Simple gestures, a hand on a shoulder, a calming presence, a kind word worked alongside Lirathi medical knowledge to produce results never before imagined. The Lirathi healers gradually embraced the combination of human empathy and their technology. They observed that this approach did not replace their methods, but enhanced them. Treatments became more effective, recovery rates improved, and the morale of the palace and citizens rose. Slowly, resistance faded, as proof became undeniable. Queen Solara, once skeptical, now openly supported the alliance. She observed her daughter's leadership and vitality, recognizing that change could coexist with tradition. The queen realized that true power was not in rigid control, but in understanding, in fostering growth, and in encouraging the best qualities of those around her. Vorin and his faction, seeing their influence diminish, finally relented. They could not deny the results, nor the support Althara had gained from both citizens and other council members. The threat of revolt or alienation from the people forced them to accept the new methods, even reluctantly. Althara's transformation became a symbol across Xalara. Citizens embraced both their traditions and the new ways, recognizing that strength could be enhanced by courage and empathy. The Lirathi culture began a gradual evolution, blending knowledge with understanding, logic with compassion. For Elias, the experience was both humbling and inspiring. He had traveled across the galaxy, never imagining that a single human touch could influence an entire civilization. Yet, he had witnessed it. The simple power of connection, trust, and courage had changed the fate of a world. In the weeks that followed, Althara continued to grow in strength and wisdom. She led her people with fairness and empathy, using her experiences to guide decisions that affected every corner of Xalara. Citizens felt seen and heard, and even the palace council embraced a new era of cooperation. One evening, standing on the balcony of the palace, Althara and Elias watched the twin suns set over the crystal forests. The mountains reflected the warm light, shimmering like gold. The princess took a deep breath, feeling the energy of her world, her people, and the lessons she had learned. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for healing me, but for showing me a different way to lead, to care, and to live." Elias smiled. "You did the work yourself. I only helped guide you. The strength was always within you, princess. You just needed to trust it." Althara nodded, feeling a quiet pride. She understood that leadership was not about fear or control. It was about courage, empathy, and the willingness to embrace both tradition and change. And in that moment, she knew that humanity, its compassion, its understanding, and its courage had proven to be a force strong enough to inspire even the most advanced civilizations. The moons rose high, casting a silver glow over the palace and the forests. Xalara had entered a new era, one of healing, understanding, and cooperation. And at the center of it all was a human and a princess, showing the galaxy that the simplest qualities, kindness, touch, and courage, could achieve the impossible. Althara turned to Elias and smiled. "Sometimes, the smallest touch can change the fate of a world," she said, remembering the first moment of trust they had shared. Elias nodded, watching the light dance across the mirrored mountains. "Sometimes," he agreed, "and sometimes, it changes more than just one world. It changes hearts, minds, and the way people believe in what is possible." As they stood together, the wind carrying the faint fragrance of crystal flowers, the palace of Xalara was alive with a renewed sense of hope and possibility. The princess, her family, and the people had learned a valuable truth. The greatest power in the universe was not found in technology alone, nor in tradition alone, but in courage, empathy, and the willingness to trust one another. And so, the story of Princess Althara and the human who had healed her spread across the stars, a tale of humanity's enduring strength, the power of trust, and the magic of a simple, caring touch. Xalara would never forget the lesson, that even in a world of advanced technology and rigid traditions, a single human heart could ignite hope, heal the sick, and inspire a civilization to embrace the extraordinary power within itself.